Right, I don't know how many of you already know how to use this, but since I'm here, I'm going to make a quick tutorial on this. This will not be as in-depth as the video mixer tutorial, but just a basic overview. So soundboards look really intimidating, but they're not. Because if you look at it, you can see all these little lines here split all of these things up into little stripes. See all the stripes? And they're numbered. So everything above this volume slider, 1, all these knobs in a row here are all the controls for this. Now, 90% of these you will never need to adjust. You really only will have to touch 2 or 3 of them, and we'll get into that in a minute. But the reason that it has so many knobs up here is because it's got 12 channels. Actually, it has, 12 channels. So it's got the same set of controls duplicated 12 times, except for these blue ones. We'll get to those in a minute, because they're weird. But don't be intimidated by this. It's just a lot of knobs, but they're not just mystery knobs. They're labeled, and you don't need to touch them most of the time. So don't let it scare you. Now, over here is kind of a weird part of the board. These plugs up here are the outputs. So those go off to either headphones, which this output goes to, or the capture card, which the other one goes to. The reason there's 2 plugs is because it's left and right, because stereo, so it's got a separate channel of audio for your left ear and your right ear. So that's why there's a red one and a black one. Now, over here, you see where it says LR with the 2 red sliders? That's master volume, and it's got 1 volume slider for each channel. Left ear, right ear. Pretty simple. So, if these are down, nothing you do over here has any effect. It's like you're just turning the master volume down completely. So, it's like turning the volume down on a stereo and then playing a CD and expecting to hear it. You've turned the volume down completely, so you're not going to hear anything. The typical position for this is going to be somewhere in this range. So just put the headphones on and kind of play with it. When in doubt, use the 0 here. And that seems counterintuitive, but just trust me, 0 is a good number on a soundboard. So over here, these are all of the inputs for the soundboard. So you can see up here, the way they're divided into stripes, at the top of each stripe is a set of plugs. So this one, these big plugs are called XLR. We use them for microphones. They use them a lot for professional microphones. These smaller ones are called 1/4 inch because they're 1/4 inch diameter. But we use mostly XLR. So this XLR plug above the first little stripe, that's the input connection for channel 1. So this whole thing is built off this stripes mentality. It's pretty simple. There's just a lot of stripes, so it looks intimidating. Now, we've only got 2 things hooked up to the soundboard over here, mic 1 and mic 2. So you can see 1 and 2. Well, what do these sliders do? These are the volume controls for that, but what do all these other things do? Well, in addition to just adjusting the volume, soundboards can do some fancy stuff. We're just going to work our way up and ignore the things that don't matter. So this first slider, pan. See how this is marked LR underneath? This is only 1 channel of audio. This cable does not carry a channel of audio separately for your left and right ear. This is just 1 channel. So pan adjusts whether it favors your left ear or your right ear. So if I turn this all the way to L, I'll only hear the audio from this source on my left ear. If I turn it all the way to R, I'll only hear it on my right ear. We don't really want to do either of those, so we're going to put it in the middle. There's a little spot where it clicks here. And then you hear it equally on both ears. That's what we want. Now, this row here, of 4 from here to here, don't worry about them. They're not important, don't worry about them. Up here, you won't really ever need to adjust these, but this is just an equalizer. So you can adjust the low frequency all the way up to high frequency sounds. If you Google equalizer, there's all sorts of information on those, but you really don't ever use those. Now, this thing up here that says gain, this is important. This kind of adjusts the sensitivity for the mic, and a lot of people confuse this with just volume. Like, oh, it's just a second volume control. No, it's not. Not quite. It's close, but not quite. It adjusts the sensitivity. It actually adjusts how much power the mic is getting, how much the soundboard's going to amplify it and make it more sensitive. It sounds like it's volume. It's not. It's more like sensitivity. So you want to not have your gain set too high, or your mic will be too sensitive and pick up things that you don't want to pick up. Like if you've got your gain too high, your mics might pick up somebody coughing or chewing gum or something across the room. That's not what you want. That's not good. So you got to keep the gain down low enough that it picks up what you want, but it's not too sensitive and picks up things that you don't want to hear. Now, under here, there's this button that looks like square root of 100 Hz. Well, that's not a square root thing. That is some kind of other symbol that's not square root. But what that button does, this button here that says, ooh, focus, there we go, symbol 100 Hertz, that cuts out tones lower than 100 Hertz. Hertz is just a measure of frequency, so it cuts out lower tones. We usually leave these on because it helps cut out hum from things like air conditioner in the background, because air conditioner hum is annoying and it's low pitched, so this will cut it out and then it's not going to annoy you anymore. So that's what that does. So what you now you know what all the knobs do, and these are the same for all the stripes. So it's exactly the same set of controls, for just duplicated for all these channels. But what are these buttons for? If it'll focus. There we go. What are those buttons for? Mute and PFL. What do those do? Well, mute does exactly what it sounds like. It mutes the channel. So when mute is down and the little red light is on, this channel is muted. Regardless of what you do with this volume slider, this channel is not going to actually have any sound coming out of it. If I unmute this, but I leave the slider down, it's still not going to have any sound. But if I unmute it and I move the slider up, well, now I've increased the volume for that channel, and you're going to be able to hear it. That's what mute does. Now, it's important to understand that even if this volume slider is up, if mute's on, you're not going to hear it. That's kind of hard to get used to because it seems kind of redundant, but it's convenient at times because you can get the volume slider set to a volume that you want and then mute it, and then you can turn it on quickly and it's already set at the volume you want. So that's what mute does. Now, what is this PFL thing? Well, we don't use that much, but on other soundboards you'll see this labeled solo, and this is meant for if you're in a church or a big venue or something and you've got the soundboard hooked up to speakers instead of a capture card for a broadcast setting like we do. So if you plug the headphones into this special jack labeled phones, see that right there? Phones. If you plug the headphones into there, instead of hearing the finished output of the soundboard, you hear all the channels if none of those PFL buttons are pressed. And that seems goofy for us, because it is, but if you're in a big venue where you've got it connected to speakers, you can hear the finished output on the speakers. So there's no point wearing headphones for that. But what if you need to check a channel? Like, what if you need to figure out if somebody's mic is working, but you don't want to do it over the speakers where everyone can hear? Well, that's what the phones are for. So the PFL buttons just allow you to select one individual channel to play over that. You don't really have to worry about that in here, but that's what they do. If you Google, if you go Google for information on solo on soundboards, this button is analogous to the solo button on other soundboards, and it has it on all the channels. So now you know what all these controls do. Volume, solo, mute, pan, which adjusts whether it's on your left or right ear. This is the equalizer. Don't really ever mess with that. Gain and low cut. So the important ones are gain, the low cut button you should probably just leave on, mute, and the volume slider. Now I did notice that someone has set all of these pan knobs to various positions randomly. We're going to fix that because we don't want, if we ever connect anything to these channels, we don't want them to play only on one of your ears. So we're going to adjust that. And they're all in the middle. So now it will be equally playing on your left and your right ear. And that's where you want that. Now what are these blue sliders? Why are they blue? Well, remember how I said these channels over here only carry one channel of sound? They don't have a separate channel for your left and right ear. That's called mono. These channels over here are mono. They only have one channel. Mono means one. Over here, these blue ones have two numbers for a reason. They carry two channels apiece. They're stereo. So see, these are a tiny bit different from all the other ones. See where it says ST3N? Maybe you can see that. It says ST3N next to those red and white plugs. That's because ST there stands for stereo, and you can see you've got red and white, left and right, or it may be flip-flopped, I don't know. But it's a left and right channel instead of just one channel like over here. So the reason that these are blue is because these are stereo. So the computer, in our case, is what's hooked to the stereo, this 1112 stereo source. The computer's hooked to that, because computers output stereo, not mono. So that's the computer, and it has almost the same controls as all the mono channels. It's just missing the typical equalizer up here. But it still has mute, it still has solo, it still has a volume slider that works just the same. And it's still got pan, it's just labeled balance because they wanted to label it differently. I don't know. I don't make the rules. So that's what those do. Now, what are these yellow and black sliders? Don't worry about them. They're not important. They don't do anything for us, so just don't even fight with them. Don't bother. What does this do? Don't touch it. That's what that does. It's there for you not to touch. Don't mess with it. It works. Don't adjust it. You won't ever need to fool with that. Now, one thing that trips some people up sometimes is that people will either accidentally or on purpose press this button. You remember what these are? These are the master volume. So naturally, if you mute the master volume, it's going to mute all of the other things too, because it's the master. If I do that, nothing I do over here is going to have any effect on what people hear, because this is muted. Don't make that mistake. Check that before you start broadcasting. So that's pretty much it. Soundboard 101. That's how to use a soundboard. Don't get intimidated by them. They're not nearly as complicated as they look once you play with them a little. Don't be afraid to pick up a microphone and put the headphones on and just sort of play with it and get a feel for how it works. Because it's a little complicated, but you can get used to it, and it's actually a really neat piece of equipment. So don't be afraid to pick it up and try and learn with it for fear of just breaking something, because unless you do something with the specific intent of breaking something, and even then you'll have a hard time, you're not going to break anything. And it will help you to play with it and learn. So that's my soundboard motivational speech. And that's it. Hope this helps.